The story begins with the fact that one fine day in the local bookstore there was a boy named Roger. He was picking out a new and interesting book for him to enjoy at his leisure. In the hands of a guy got a very strange, brightly colored book, which he could not even open. He thought it was very interesting that the book does not open. Looking at the Kinga in his hands, the guy wondered how this could even be, and what such an interesting book was all about. When Roger looked around, he found a fellow clerk sitting in the back of the store, reading a book. The boy began to notice other strange things. He was surprised that it was the 21st century, and he was reading the magic book of the immortals. Does this guy really believe in it? Unexpectedly for Roger, the guy who was reading the book felt tension, but Roger continued to watch. At one moment the guy teleported abruptly to an unknowable island, where it was very hot and beautiful, and all around him and a strange, apparently magical book. After another moment he was back in the bookstore, unable to believe his eyes. The guy could not understand what was happening and what had just happened to him. He experienced a global shock of the situation, and could not believe whether it was an illusion. Without thinking, the guy decided to buy this mysterious book. The seller replied, "No problem, $40, and it's yours." The guy was very indignant that the salesman did not even look at the Kinga, and immediately called the price. Roger could not stand it and loudly expressed his dissatisfaction. The guy continued to read his book and without looking up replied that the book cost $40. Roger was shocked by the rudeness of the salesman. He became very curious about what was in the book that the salesman couldn't even look away. The guy asked loudly, "Boss, what's so interesting about it?" The salesman did pay attention to the guy and looked up. He asked Roger if he couldn't see the cover of the book. He was reading a book immortal novel. Roger started laughing and said, "How could a whole novel be in such a thin book?" At one point Roger felt something wrong. He suddenly felt very sick. His condition was very serious. He could not stand on his feet and leaned on the table. His body was shaking and vibrating. The salesman was surprised and began to worry about Roger and asked him what was wrong with him. But Roger was very angry and shouted at the salesman to get his hands off him and not to touch him again. The guy was holding his head trying to come to his senses, and in a moment he heard the salesman say, "Roger, what's the matter?" The boy was very frightened and surprised, because how does the salesman know his name? In this bookstore Roger came today for the first time. Could this guy be immortal? The salesman discovered the guy's excitement, and then pointed out that the guy put his wallet on the table and the wallet had his ID card with the guy's name on it, so the salesman recognized his name with the card. Roger pulled himself together and thought about how immortal people are because they can't exist in this world. The salesman offered to put the book and the purchase aside for a few minutes and discuss the boy's condition. After all, he certainly noticed that there was something wrong with him. As it turned out, the salesman's name was John, and in his original world he was a supreme immortal. This planet lacks spiritual energy, so even though its population is in the billions, there is not a single cultivator there. But then suddenly I had to move to another planet. The guy also said that if he wanted to leave this place and return to the world of the immortals at this rate, he didn't even know how he could do it, even with his superpowers and talents. The guy also confessed that about a month ago he suddenly awakened to a system called the Immortality Promotion System. John also said that the system told him that in 10 years, this planet will attract all the monsters, and the planet will be completely dead. He also said that the worst thing was that the demonic energy of these demons would gradually block the path to immortality. Even if he had all the knowledge of the immortal world, he would never be able to overcome the boundary and rise above them. The only way to get past the people of the real world would be to qualify to hunt demons. It's also directly related to whether or not I get out of here, so make up your mind or die, that's the challenge. To get help from the system, you must first sell a copy of the Immortal Cultivation Method. This book contains all the recorded knowledge gained during my lifetime. Each of these secret books was priceless in my original world. But unfortunately in this world no one understands the value of this book. In a whole month the guy didn't sell a single copy. He also confessed that if nothing changes in the near future, he will not be able to pay for the bookstore. John said that if he was not mistaken, Mr. has no more than a month to live. He has a very serious, incurable disease. The guy recommended spending more time with his family. Roger was simply shocked to hear such information. He didn't expect to hear it when he went to the bookstore just to pick up a book. He began to ask the guy that if he saw something wrong with him, how he could be saved. The guy begged for help with his problem. Closing his book, the salesman replied in a sad, low tone, "It can be cured, but it is very expensive." Roger decided that based on what had just happened, this teenager should not be a fraud. For the good of my daughter, I should try. Roger turned to the salesman, "If you can cure me, I'm willing to spend all my money." Without much thought, Roger got down on his knees and started pleading with John. John raised the guy up and answered, "I didn't say it could be 100% cured, but just a little bit of hope you have a chance." John held up another book and said, "The books on the shelves could not have been opened by those who did not have outstanding spiritual roots, so all I can do is pass on the basic law of IQ operation." The guy was looking closely at the book and examining it. John also reported that having this condition usually has no medical solution, but there is only one way to keep him alive for a year. Roger held the book in his hands and thought that maybe he was thinking too much and this guy was just messing with him. At one point, John takes his book out of the guy's hands and replies, "I see you don't quite believe that." The salesman came to his seat and said, "Just pay $40 for the book and leave." The guy told the salesman that he would definitely buy the book, but that's not what was important to him right now. He knew that it might be his only way out. No matter what, he had to try. Roger starts yelling at the salesman, I'll buy it, no matter what the price, please sell it to me. This is the way to cure yourself." After that, the seller announced the price of $10,000. It would cost $10,000. The guy was in great shock. This amount astounded him. The salesman silently continued to read his book and said, "You don't have to do that either." Doubting and thinking for a long time, Roger nevertheless decides to acquire this knowledge. He lays $10,000 on the table and says, "Here's the money to take." The salesman John holds the book in front of him and says, "This book, don't give it to anyone. No one must not know about it." After Roger left the bookstore, he pondered the whole situation. The next day, sitting down to dinner, the guy didn't want to eat anything. He just sat and looked at the food on the table. At that moment, his daughter was also in the kitchen, and she noticed that something was wrong with her father and asked, "Daddy, why aren't you eating?" Roger looked at his daughter with a smile and replied, "It's okay, Daddy's not hungry." The wife also noticed something wrong with her husband and asked, "What's wrong with your face? Don't you feel well?" Roger immediately replied that it could still be, "I was tired after a long day at work." The guy said, "I'll go to my room and get some rest, and then I'll get up and eat if I'm hungry." The daughter was worried that something was wrong with her father. The guy really didn't feel well. He went to his room and closed the doors, then closed his face and remembered his family. Roger understood that for the sake of his family he had to live and develop. After locking his room, the boy sat down on his bed and began to take out the very book he had purchased for $10,000 and slowly opened it. Looking at the pictures in the book, the guy doubted that it would work. Roger sat and carefully studied the contents of the book. He knew he either had to believe it or he bought it for nothing. The boy pulled himself together and decided to trust the book after all. He sat down on his bed in the lotus position and meditated. As he meditated, the boy realized that he could not walk the path until he was this way. As Roger continued to meditate, he felt incredibly comfortable. Next, what the guy read shocked him. He realized that this book and its methods, this technique, is a real cultivation for immortality. It was late evening outside, but the boy could not tear himself away from the book. He could not believe that this book was really magical and had the incredible power of immortality. The boy was hopeful that he could be helped. His feelings brought tears to his eyes. Opening his room, the guy shouted, "Honey, open a bottle of red wine and prepare some delicious dishes to enjoy my day." The wife was very surprised by her husband's joy and celebration and asked, "What kind of celebration today? Why are you so happy?" She also recalled that the guy didn't even open a bottle of wine on New Year's Eve, so what happened today? Roger abruptly hugged his wife very strongly and lovingly. His wife asked, "What on earth are you doing? Our daughter right next